happy this morning. This is a good morning to be happy. Perhaps in our prayer groups yesterday we were released of a lot of things that have bothered us, and we trust that is so. And after such release, we can expect a gradual freedom within ourselves, a release, a relaxation. And I believe it will continue to come as we continue to carry on this process of cleansing throughout the week. As we go into our talk this morning, I think we will consider a little bit about this house of life in which we live. We said yesterday that we were mind and spirit residing in a body house. But we are all one. We cannot separate these different compartments, body, mind, and spirit, for man is one. And a thing which affects one part of us affects all of us. We talked about the subconscious and burying things in the subconscious. Now, we've all been reading about the subconscious. Maybe you know as much about it as I do. But let's look at it for just a minute. We might say, what is the subconscious? And then we turn around and say, oh, I wish that we knew, because nobody knows exactly what the subconscious is. Those who have studied the deep mind have not plumbed the depth. They've not found the bottom of it yet. It's greater than anyone knows. But anyway, it is the deep self which is hidden in every individual. When the child is born, the body functions are carried on perfectly by the unconscious, subconscious mind of the child. The heart beats, the circulation is carried on, the food digests, all by the deep mind of the child, the unconscious mind of the child. That's true of you right now and of me. When we go to sleep, our subconscious mind keeps our heart beating and our blood circulating and our food digesting, and the subconscious mind has control of the body, except when the conscious mind butts in and disrupts the good running of the machinery of the body. So the subconscious mind has a great deal of power over our bodies. It is thought now that there is consciousness in every cell of the body. And the substance of the brain is very like that which is in the marrow of the backbone and the nerves. So perhaps the substance of the brain does run to every part of the body, and when you injure a finger, you feel it in your brain. Well, perhaps even the mind of us extends to the very limits of our body. We have had this illustration for so long of the conscious mind being like the part of an iceberg that sticks above the water, and the subconscious being the great 9/10, 7/8, whatever it is that lies below the surface. We've all heard that many times. But since the emotions which arise from the glands and the other parts of the body have such an effect on the subconscious mind, we might say that the conscious mind covers the area which is our heads, and the subconscious mind takes in the area which is all of our bodies, just lightning as to the area of the conscious and the subconscious minds. And we do often think that the subconscious is down here. That is so true that the ancients called what we now call the subconscious the heart. The heart. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. We know that with the conscious mind we think, we will, we desire, we plan, but the subconscious mind does not think, nor will, nor plan, but the subconscious mind is the great force. The subconscious is the motivating force. And we may think and desire a lot, but we may not accomplish it, and when we don't, we do not have perfect coordination between the conscious and the subconscious. The subconscious says no. Often in healing, we think we believe something, and we say, oh, I do believe the Lord can do this. Down in the subconscious, something says, tain't so, tain't so, tain't so, tain't so. And we're like the double-minded man that Paul speaks of, who is unstable in all his ways, when the conscious and the subconscious are not free to be in absolute coordination. And that's like the little hind that Dr. Clark used to tell us about, the little deer whose feet absolutely track. The hind feet go in exactly the same tracks that the front feet have made. And when it goes scaling the mountain, it never falls because it sees where it puts its front feet, and then it puts its hind feet in exactly the same place. The front feet might be likened to the conscious mind and the hind feet to the subconscious mind. So the important thing for us to get our conscious and our subconscious minds in perfect agreement and have no dispute between them. And then we are one person. It is the subconscious mind that motivates all of our actions. The conscious mind might be likened to an architect who draws the blueprints for a building, but the subconscious mind might be likened to the great corps of workmen who erects the building. The conscious mind might be likened to the boss, the foreman on a job, but the subconscious mind is the workers who turn the instructions into reality. The power within us is in the subconscious mind. Subconscious mind is very, very forceful, very powerful. And it is necessary that we shall know something about it, but it's more necessary that we shall have it cleaned up. We might liken the conscious and subconscious mind to the house that you live in, if you live in a good-sized house. The conscious mind is the upstairs where you keep all nice and clean and you invite your friends. And here you have your objects d'art, which you show in conversational pieces and so on. And that's the conscious mind. And you invite your friends in. The subconscious mind might be likened to the basement, where you put a lot of things in the basement. They're necessary, but they're not on display. Down there in the subconscious mind is the furnace with all of its fingers reaching out to all over the house. It isn't pretty, but it's very necessary. And there are the electric wires, the conduits, and so on. There are the water pipes. All of these are very necessary, but none of them are beautiful. Now, that's something like the subconscious mind. All of these things which govern and run, motivate our bodies are down in the cellar, in the basement. They keep life running. It's necessary that they shall be in good repair. And then we stick a lot of things in the basement that we don't know what else to do with. We have a lot of junk, and we have a lot of good junk, you know. It's just too good to throw away, so we take the good junk and we put it in the basement. First thing you know, it molds, and sometimes we get so much junk down there that the junk rubs the electric wires and sets something afire, or the water pipes are rusted, or something happens. And so it is with the subconscious mind. We get so much clutter down there in the basement of our house of life that the whole house of life gets cluttered. And that clutter was the thing I was talking about yesterday morning, as we take these hurts and stick them down in the basement and cover them up so nobody can see them. And the whole basement of life gets full of this clutter that we have hidden down there. And the basement gets so full we can't navigate when we try to get in it. And it gets foul and it's very unpleasant. That's the subconscious mind. And some of the things that happen to us. Now I want to talk to you this morning about thorns that fester, some other things that we stick down in our subconscious minds. When our daughter was a little girl, once she ran a sliver of wood very deep right here in her hand, the thick of the large part of the lower thumb. It went in very, very deep, and I tried to pick it out, and I couldn't get it out. And she cried and screamed, of course, and before I knew it, the hand was red and sore and swollen. I knew something had to be done. We'd have to take her to a doctor, and he probably would lance it and get that sliver out. But I thought I'd try one more time. So amid a shower of tears and prayerful effort, I finally got the sliver out. I was happy when I held that sliver in my hand. It wasn't big. Not a big thing to have caused so much trouble, but it evidently was poisoning her hand. There was no question about that. It could have caused blood poisoning. I was glad when I held it in my hand because I had it, and it was not in my child anymore. A lot of things are thorns in life that fester, and the things which fester most are not physical slivers at all. They are invisible slivers, but those are the things that fester worse. Hate is a thorn that festers. How many of us have had a deep thorn of hate down in our deep self, buried more deeply than we know and covered so that we can't bring it out? And down there in the deep mind, it festers and it sends up a hateful fume, and it hurts us. How many of us are hurt by hate? We all are. Don't let on like we aren't, because we are. We've all been hated or resented or been jealous. Hate and resentment and jealousy are thorns broken off the same tree. They all come from the same root. And they all grow because they offend the ego. And when the ego is offended, then we are deeply hurt. Fritz Kunkel tells us that jealousy is often the result of the unlived life. When a person has the ability to do things which he has never had the opportunity to do, the ability which is in him, which never is expressed, rises up and beats against the cage of its restrictions, because that person knows he has the ability to do things he's never done, and the self is struggling like a bird in a cage. And that person often feels a jealousy toward the person whom he sees doing the things that he feels he is capable of doing. Dr. Kunkel gives us a very understanding treatise on that, and I like it. Because the longer I live, the less I condemn people. And the more I know about life, the more I realize there's reason for everything we do and for every emotion we have. And when I see people who are struggling under that sort of thing, I'm sorry for them. I'm sorry that they did not have the opportunity to do all of the things they were capable of doing. Now, jealousy carries also the sense of inferiority in that one fears he is not able to hold the love of the person whom he loves. A man is jealous because he fears someone else may be more attractive to his wife than he is. A woman is jealous for the same reason. We fear our inadequacy, and therefore we are jealous. We fear that we are not adequate to hold the love of the people whom we love, and therefore we become jealous. And that jealousy within us can rise up and rile and fester in the deep self until it creates a great poison within us. Oh, hate is such a terrible thing. A young woman said, I just hate to go to my mother-in-law's. When I'm with her, I just feel so mean inside, I just want to slap her. Of course I don't, I just grit my teeth. But she says she just talks like Steve was her little boy. And he isn't. He's a grown man and he's my husband. See, there it is. He's my husband. She wants her husband exclusively, and she doesn't want her husband to be possessed by his mother in any way. It is touching the ego, you see. And it's always something that rubs the ego that sets up this jealousy, this hate, this enmity within us. Doris said, I could just scratch her eyes out if I were a cat, because Paul was mine before she came along and took him away from me. See? Hate because someone else took her boyfriend. She was not able to hold him, and she did not look within herself to see the inability, but she turned that inability in hate out to someone else. You know, it's the hardest thing in the world for us to take the blame for anything. When we're very young, we begin blaming things onto others. We say, Jimmy did me and did this. Mary pushed me. Tommy made me do it. The cat knocked it off and broke it. Oh, we can just think of all sorts of ways of laying everything onto other people when we're little bitty kids. And when we grow up, it is very difficult for us to stand up and say, I'm to blame. It's my fault. And I believe that this is one of the greatest marks of maturity of anything I know. When we come to the place of maturity where we can stand up and say, I'm to blame, it's my fault, and not lay the blame onto somebody else, then we're really growing up. It's one of the hardest things in the world for human beings to do. So when someone hurts us or when the situation turns out badly, we can't take the responsibility. So we must find somebody to lay it on to and then hate that person. Why? In order to save our face so we can live with ourselves. That's what the psychiatrist told me. It's necessary to save face. If we couldn't save face, we might commit suicide. We must save face. So when we realize why we're doing it, why then we understand, well, I'm doing this to save face because I'm just not big enough to take the responsibility. Have to live with myself, and so I have to think well of myself, so I'll lay all of this onto somebody else, and I will be scot-free. Well, hates have hurt all of us, and then we don't need to talk about these things without saying, how shall I get rid of them? No use to bring them up unless we have some method of getting rid of them. Jesus said forgive. Jesus said forgive 70 times 7, but that's easy to say and hard to do. Sometimes we say, oh, I've forgiven her, but I haven't forgotten. And dear folks, we haven't forgiven until we can forget. As long as we keep grabbing the thing back and using it and wrestling with it, we haven't forgotten. Suppose you were to give your friend who lives next to you something perfectly lovely. Oh, I know, a nice fur piece like Mary Harris wears around her shoulder. That beautiful silver thing that Mary wears and looks so lovely on her. Suppose you were to give a fur piece like that to your friend next door. And then every 2 or 3 days you would run into her house and you would grab that fur piece and you would get out and mop the floor with it. And then you'd get up and give it to her and go back home again. How long do you think she'd stand that? She'd tell you, this is mine. You gave it to me. You keep your hands off of it now and let it alone. Well, of course she would. But that's exactly the way we do with our sins that we have confessed to God. We come and we confess our sins to God, and God has promised to forgive us and to take them away as far as the east is from the west, and we've done it. We've all done it. And then every so often we run and we grab those sins again and we wallow around with them and we mop the floor with them, and when we've worn ourselves out, we give them to God again and we go on our way a while. Just like mopping the floor with a beautiful silver fur piece. Exactly. If it's God's, leave it with God. If God has forgiven us, then accept it. That's one of the hardest things in the world for us to do, isn't it? To accept God's forgiveness. When He's forgiven us. And when He's forgiven us, we should have the hate melt out of us. And suppose you hate somebody so that you just can't think of them without getting all riled up inside. I think the very finest method of getting rid of this is one that Roland Brown has used for a number of years, and one of the men brought it up in the prayer group yesterday, and I appreciate it very much that he remembered it, and he brought it up in our prayer group. If there is someone whom you hate to the point where you keep feeling a fester every time you think of that person, Roland says to imagine with your divine imagination that person kneeling in prayer. Let's just do it. You think of the person you dislike the very most. And see that person kneeling in prayer. And then you go and kneel down beside him. And if you're big enough to do it, put your arm across his shoulder. If you hate him so that you can't, why, just kneel there a while. And then you pray from the bottom of your heart that the Spirit of God may flow down upon both of you, filling your heart with love and peace, and filling the heart of this one whom you don't like with love and peace also. And the same love and the same joy and the same peace which comes to him comes to you, and you become blended together in Christ's love, which is a higher dimension than any human love or any human form of forgiveness. Now, you may find it hard to do that the first time you try it. You may find that you will resent kneeling there, and you're going to be the one you'll have trouble with, not the other fellow. But you just keep on trying this until you get yourself on your knees beside this person. And when you do this, the battle's won. And then on your knees in humility, pray that the Spirit of God flow into the both of you and bring healing to both of you. Thank you, Father. Thank you. It's wonderful, isn't it? And when we have done this, God has done it. I don't believe human beings are capable of their own strength alone of overcoming the hates that fester in our deep subconscious. It takes the power of the infinite God to do it. But isn't it wonderful that we have access to that power? We all have access to that power. We can use it. I could go on and talk a whole lot more about these hates, but I have several other thorns that we want to pick out this morning. Fear is another thorn that festers deep in the flesh. Fear does a great deal of damage. Children are born with two fears, we are told. One is the fear of falling, and the other is the fear of loud noises. These protect children. And as we grow up, there are some wholesome fears which are good for us. The primitive man had the fear of wild beasts, and God gave him certain glands which would function and throw some stimulating fluid into the bloodstream when he needed to run fast to escape the wild beasts, or when he needed to hunt or something of that sort. This was given to man for his protection. We still have that in our bodies. We don't need to run from wild beasts, but when we get angry, that thing is thrown off into our bloodstream, and we're just so mad we've got to do something, and you better just get out and walk or punch a punching bag until you wear off the excess adrenaline. It's a good thing to do. I can't seem to get away from this. But when you get all hepped up because you get mad, just realize the body's functioning. You have an excess amount of adrenaline, and you've got to work it off. Get up and go to the gym or go swimming or do something with your body until the body wears itself down. If you don't do that, well, you're apt to take it out on some individual. That isn't too good. Kneel in prayer with the individual in your mind when you've gotten this all out of your system until the power of God shall cleanse. Well, let's go back to our fears. The child is born with two basic fears. There are other fears that are good. The child should be taught to fear running in the street in front of speeding cars. The child should be taught to fear deep water and a hot stove, things like that, which are for the protection of the child. It's good for us to fear some things. Fear is good. But when fear goes beyond the point of protection, it is bad, and fear can become very bad. In our prayer group yesterday, we had some bringing these things out of one boy who had been so frightened by an older brother who did it purposely to tease him that fear became a nightmare to him until he was a grown man. And that can happen. Fear can become so intense that it just chokes us. I know many, many women who can't stay in a house alone after dark. Well, they're just afraid. What are they afraid of? They don't know. Something's frightened them when they were children. It should be a penitentiary offense to tell children stories of ghosts and goblins and hobgoblins and all that sort of thing, and tell children that if you're not good, I'll have the police to get you. And oh my goodness, why do people do those awful things? Do they realize what they're doing to the subconscious mind of the child, trying to coerce a child with fear in order to make it obedient, when what they're doing is simply crippling the child for life in certain areas of life? And we all probably have been crippled in some area of our life because of fears that have come upon us. And we have these fears to deal with. They are festers. They are festering slivers down in the deep personality, and they need to be picked out. And when we understand that God is love and God is light, but God is also in the darkness, the peaceful velvet darkness that allows us sleep, and when we realize that all of this is given to us for our good and the darkness is as blessed as the light, we should not fear the darkness. We should not fear anything when God is with us. For fear hath torment. I have a little circle that I like to use in regard to fear. Fear hath torment. Everybody who's been fearful knows it. But perfect love casteth out fear. What is perfect love? God is love. And when we are completely lost in the love of God, that love is sufficient to cast out the fears of life. When we're bathed in the love, when the love bathes us, when the love of God fills our deep subconscious, the cellars, the basements of our houses, it will help to pull out these slivers that fester, the things down deep within us that hurt. Guilt is a thorn that festers. Oh, how we suffer from guilt. A ranchman once said that measures which were necessary to control the old goats sometimes crippled the kids. You might transfer that to the human kids, too. A long time ago, when I was a little girl, we used to go to revival meetings, and the minister maybe would see some old goat out in the congregation, and he'd think, I'll convert him tonight. So he preached of hellfire and damnation, and he had made hell so real that he just shook us all over the flames. And the little children in the congregation went home and covered their heads with the bedclothes and quaked in the night because of that awful measure that some preacher was trying to get an old goat back there. Starr Daily tells when he was a child, his stepmother took him to one of these kind of meetings, and he was just frightened to death. And he says that was one cause of his running away, his awful fear of God. He feared God so terribly. If God was a God like that, he didn't want anything to do with him. That's an awful, fearful God. Isn't it terrible that children hear such things as that until they fear God, and they think of God only as one who tortures and torments and follows them around and looks over their shoulder and sees what they're doing? Oh, my, that's blasphemy. I'm so sorry for God. I just am. I'm sorry for God when people interpret him like that. I would be sorry if anybody would tell those things about you. Well, it's just the same for them to tell those awful things about God, and especially to little children. The fears that come into the lives of little children are buried thorns in the flesh of life that fester and send out poison. Guilt. And we imagine that we're very guilty. And I know sometimes little children will feel very, very guilty, and oh, they've done some little thing, and they think, oh, I'm going to hell, I'm going to be punished, I'm going to burn up, all of that sort of thing, or some little thing that a child does. We all suffer from guilt. I do too. Most of my sins were just dumbness. Just sheer stupidity because I didn't know any better. And I think most of us have not deliberately sinned and done wrong purposely as much as we've just committed boneheads. Well, I did this thing, and wasn't it a foolish thing to do? Wasn't this a silly bonehead? Well, perhaps those really aren't sins. I don't think they are. I think they're just the stumbling blocks of life which we can turn into steps if we are so aligned through the grace of God. We've all made mistakes. And I remember that Glenn said a long time ago, don't always think you've made a mistake when a thing doesn't turn out the way you think it should. Sometimes when the thing turns out adversely, according to the way we look at it, it's the best thing in the world in the long run. So maybe our boneheads aren't so bony after all. Maybe we just can't always have the sunshine. Maybe we need a few rains because it's rain's necessary, you know, to bring forth some harvest. But in life, we want sunshine all the time. We're made that way. And when we have a cloudy spell, why, we begin to wonder what's happening to us. Let's hold steady through the cloudy spell. Maybe it's just watering our life and testing our fibers so that we can grow a little bit bigger and stand a little stronger through the adversities. You know, this is a school in which we're living. We're put here for a purpose. We're put here to learn, to grow. That's why we're here, to grow and to help other people do the same thing. And I discovered that it takes adversity to make us grow. I never yet have seen a rocking chair in a gymnasium. Have you? It seems that athletes don't train in rocking chairs, somehow. They train out on the field and they pummel and they... I was with our little grandson. He's 15, our oldest one, and he's going into senior high school this year, and in August, he went out for football practice. And I was staying down in Fort Worth with him while his parents and the other boy and his grandfather were out in Colorado. I had just come from the ashram with Stanley Jones and was going over to Kanuguk to a camp, so I didn't have time to go to Colorado. So young George and I stayed there together. And the first 3 days that boy came in from football practice, he was so sore he could hardly sit on a chair. And when he got up just like he pulled himself together. And at the end of that first week, oh my, he was so tired. He was so glad when Sunday came. Sunday morning he got up and came out to breakfast and he said, I'm so glad I can rest today. And then pretty soon he drew a long breath and he said, if I can just hold out to the end of this week, I'll be in. But that child was getting pummeled. But he liked it. He wanted to be on the team. It was something new. It was something challenging. And he was taking all of the pummeling of the football tryout. And I think the coach was just pouring it on him because he would come home and tell me at the end of each day how many had fallen out. So at the end of the 2 weeks, the coach didn't have a very large percent of the boys he started in with, but he had George. And I was proud of it. But you know, life is something like that. If we're going to amount to anything, we've got to take some pummeling. And we've got to stand some hard knocks. But the hard knocks make something of us. And if we can't stand a little bit of hard knocks, we're just simply not worth the game. So we've got to take some adversity. They're for our good. They're for our growth. They're for our development. A woman talked with me one time, and she told me of the most awful things that had happened in the last year. It seemed enough to kill any 3 people. And then she looked up at me, and the tears were in her eyes as she said, oh, but Mrs. Parkhurst, I've grown more this past year than all the rest of my life together. Sure. She'd taken the pummeling. She was getting tough. She was able to stand it. And Paul talks of running the race of life and being athletes of the Spirit. That's what we want to be. And when we're crybabies and something happens that gets us down and we just sit down and bawl about it. Sure. We don't get any place that way, do we? Let's get out. Let's get out. Let's stand on our 2 feet. Let's make the team. Let's look at these hard knocks that come to us and thank the Lord for them because they are developing in us something that the Lord sees needs to be developed there. Maybe we have felt this resentment toward somebody in order that we can have the joy of forgiving. And I tell you, there's just nothing like it when you get over a hill like that and can love somebody who's hurt you. I used to think that Jesus said, forgive the person who has done something wrong to you for that person's sake. I don't think so anymore. I think Jesus said, forgive the other people for your own sake because it does you so much good. I really do. I think that is the joy and the value of forgiveness, is what it does to the individual who forgives. He has mounted up above his little self. He has risen to a higher plane. He has partaken of the divine nature, which enables him to do this, and he's bigger than himself. So if you have something that you have to forgive, do this lovely thing that Roland says, and then do something else. Do something nice for the person who's hurt you. Speak kindly to them and say lovely things about them to other people. Now, that's the most important. Behind their backs where they can't hear it. Speak complimentary things of this individual to other people. Now, you'll find out that does something for you. I know. When anybody speaks of the person who's hurt you and you feel this grievance, oh, yes, isn't she a charming person? She's she does this and this and this and this and this. You know the story of the man who couldn't say anything nice about the fellow that had died, except he sure did have good teeth? Well, maybe you can say that she has good teeth anyway. and compliment her to other people, and don't say a derogatory thing down in your deep subconscious. That's where the trouble lies, is down in this cellar of your house. Get that cleaned out. That's the great necessity. That's the thing we're trying to do in this camp, is to clean out the basement. Because I have known people who have come to a healing camp and been wonderfully healed of some disease. And the basement was all full of these festering slivers and buried hurts, and they went home from the camp healed from a disease, but very soon they had another one. It always works like that. You can't maintain wholeness nor physical health if the basement of your house is all full of this clutter. You have to get cleared out in the basement of your life if you're going to have a permanent healing. Now let's just mark that down. And that's the reason I'm doing this. Because this is fundamental. And it makes a very lovely balance when Norman is speaking of Jesus and his healing power, and Ethel is doing the same thing. We're having a kind of a synchronizing here in our healing mission, talking from these different angles. Now, another thing that I want to talk about is self-condemnation. Self-depreciation. And how we do cuss ourselves out. How we do bemean ourselves. And psychiatrists say that self-hate is one of the most difficult things that they have to deal with. And basically almost every person who comes to a psychiatrist hates themselves in some area. Why do we hate ourselves? We have fallen beneath the standard that has been set for us. And it may be that the standard has been too high in the first place. Freud, you know, was a Jew. He is the father of psychiatry, although many of the modern psychiatrists do not follow him, thank the Lord. But Freud was a Jew, and the thing that made him start this study of his was the terrible amount of laws that the Jews had to live by. Restrictions, 120, 100 and how many, I don't know. 100 and so many different laws that the Jewish people had to keep. And if they broke one of them, it was a terrible thing. As I said the other night, if you had a ribbon pinned to your dress, that's carrying a load, that's committing a sin on the Sabbath day, you mustn't do it. All of these little do's and don'ts. You couldn't build a fire. Oh, you just couldn't do anything. And they had to live by all of this great pressure of restrictions. And Freud discovered that it was simply destroying the personality of the people. So he rebelled. And he said all of these restrictions and these do's and don'ts are just killing us. They're doing something to our personalities. We were born to be free, we should be free, and so on. So Freud broke away. And everybody who first breaks away always goes to a great extreme limit in the opposite direction. And that's what Freud did. But since his time, about the first of the century, much progress has been made in this great art. Much study has been made, and we are finding honest truth that a lot of the restrictions that were put upon even good Christian people have been so high we've not been able to live up to them. You mustn't do this and you mustn't do that, and if you do this, you're a bad boy and you should be punished. And the little child isn't able quite to live up to all of those things. When some of you were little, you couldn't polish your shoes on Sunday morning. They always had to be polished on Saturday. When some of you were little, your mother couldn't build a fire on Sunday. She cooked the meal on Saturday and you ate it on Sunday. Some of us who are living think you couldn't go out and play ball in the yard on Sunday. Oh, that was a terrible, wicked thing. You couldn't go skating on Sunday. Oh, that was wicked, that was bad, that was bad. Now, Jesus never talked like that. Jesus said the Sabbath is for man. Yes. We are pre-Christian. Just as we're pre-Christian in our conception of God, we have been pre-Christian in our conception of the Sabbath, because Jesus washed away, absolutely ignored a lot of those old Jewish ideas, and a lot of the Christian people have carried them over. Well, not in our day very much. Sabbath is anything else. But when I was a child, it was that sort of a Sabbath. And children who have grown up under that restriction become so repressed within themselves and feel so guilty within themselves that they come to hate themselves because they can't measure up to the standard which is set for them. That's the main cause of self-hate. And we have to face it if we're going to clean out the basement of our lives. And how shall we face it? Let's turn to Jesus, always. What did Jesus say about little children? Oh, allow them to come to me. Don't hinder them from coming to me. For they're like the kingdom of heaven. And to hinder these little children, it were better than a millstone be hanged about your neck and you be dropped in the depth of the sea. Jesus knew it was that terrific to injure a child. Jesus is for us. The God of Jesus is for us. Jesus loves the little child you were, and the little child we tried to release yesterday. In our group, we had the most delightful time. We shut our eyes, and then we put all these little persons who were ourselves when we were from birth to 10. And we put them out in the center of the circle and kept our eyes closed, and then we imagined Jesus walking into the circle, and we watched to see what Jesus did. And I saw him come right to the little girl I used to be and pick her up, and she put her head right down here on his shoulder. And I warrant that everyone in the circle saw Jesus touching them. I just showed up. Starr Daily says it is instinctive for a child who has had any training whatsoever in Sunday school to recognize a picture of Jesus. He says a child is so fresh from God that they know what Jesus looks like. And a very little child will know, that's Jesus. Have you noticed that? If you haven't tried. They have been so short time from heaven that they recognize Jesus. And the little child within you, which you released yesterday and put out in the center of your circle, knew Jesus when he walked into the circle. And that love of Jesus was able to pick up that child and to release the hurts in that little one, and to fill the little one which was in our yesterdays and which lives today within us with such love and joy and release that this morning we can have a new light on our faces. The release of the little child which is buried deep in our subconscious. And the same Christ can release us from everything that is in our deep subconscious, from all of these slivers, and especially from the sense of guilt. People commit suicide because of self-hate more than any other reason. They get to the place, they hate themselves, they can't live with themselves any longer. And self-hate is something we must face if we're going to clean out the house of life, because it is a festering sliver, a thorn in the flesh. One way we can do it is to look from the Christian point of view of Jesus' attitude of the Sabbath and of our restrictions, and also of the instinctive urges which God has given to every one of us, which are good when they are used rightly, and which are bad only when they have gone to excess. Everything that God has given us is good if it is rightly used. So we can feel comfortable with our Father because he has done the best thing that is possible for us. And I think God has great tolerance. I think God has great tolerance. He isn't near as hard on us as some people are. And as I grow older, I grow so tolerant with people. You know, I've decided that everybody does just about as well as he can with the amount of intelligence he was born with and the circumstances of his environment. I think most people do, really. I just don't condemn anybody. I realize that if I were in his place, I might have done worse. The American Indian has such a beautiful saying, I do not condemn anyone until I have walked in his moccasins for 2 weeks. Isn't that nice? And when I see someone whom I am prone to judge, I say, if I were in his moccasins 2 weeks, how would I be feeling? It's a question, isn't it? Everybody suffers the same thing that we suffer. We're all in the same mesh. We're all caught in this mesh together. We all have these same thorns that fester. We all have these same hurts. We all have these same restrictions. And when we can decide that there is nothing unusual in my experience, that thousands of people have experienced it before I lived and are experiencing it now, and we can look at other people clear-eyed and feel, bless your heart, you're doing the best you can, and maybe you're suffering as much underneath as we are suffering or have suffered. Then there should come an understanding and a camaraderie between us and other folks. You know, we can't find any bottom to this subconscious. But something came to me as I was studying on this and writing. You know, the planets and, I don't mean the planets, I mean the islands and the continents of the earth are just the part of the land that stick up above the water. And down underneath, they're all joined together. There's solid substance down in the center of the earth, and where this substance sticks up above the water, well, that's an island. And no man is an island. And I wonder if we are to all join together somehow below the surface of human knowing within the realm of the infinite heart of God. Perhaps we're all bound together down underneath. And you're just a little island that sticks up and you think, oh, I'm all alone and nobody cares for me and nobody ever suffered like I've suffered. Oh, my dear, down under the water, we're all connected. I believe we are. I believe we are. It should give us a feeling of oneness, a feeling of security, really. It should give us a feeling of other understanding and a feeling of brotherhood that nothing else gives us. No man is an island. No man stands alone. No man is alone, for the power and the love of God surrounds all of us as the ocean surrounds the islands. The power and the love of God is in the air that we breathe. The very breath that we draw into our lungs is the very breath of life. What is it, prana? Which is translated both breath and spirit in the New Testament. The same word is translated breath and spirit. When Jesus on the cross gave up his breath, he gave up his spirit. It's translated both ways. And when you draw in the air that you breathe, you are drawing the breath of God. And if you will bless it as such, you will bless every breath of life. I like to feel that the breath of God, which draws the oxygen into my body, is sending that life-giving oxygen to every part of my body. Sometimes I shut my eyes and see these little particles of God's power like little sparks of light in the bloodstream. We had the red and the white corpuscles, and I put in some little sparklers in there like little fireflies. And I imagine these little sparks of divine light flowing through my body, and when they come to any part where it needs the healing power is given. Of course, that's what the red corpuscles or the white corpuscles are for. They build up, they heal. That's their business. But I like to put these little sparks of light in there too. The very breath we breathe is of God. Now, thorns. These are all thorns that fester. And then I think that everything that hurts us simply responds to something that's already in us that hurts. Something hurts you today because a long time ago something else hurt you that is like that situation. And you can't take this situation because when you were 12 something happened and you couldn't handle that situation. So this situation reminds you of what happened way back there and you can't take it. I've discovered that every time I get angry, there's something in me that responds to the thing. Out here, there are always two poles. Always have to be two poles. Electricity and everything else. There's two. And there's two poles in these thorns that fester in us. It's the thorn in us that flies up against the thing outside us. Some resentment in you that flies up against the resentment of another person. It's always true. It is simply the fire from without that lights the kindling on the inside and makes it blaze up like a conflagration. A woman told me that when she was a little girl, she and her brother used to wash dishes together, and her brother would make a face at her, like that. And she slapped him one day, and then her mother whipped her, and she didn't dare slap him anymore because he was a little younger than she. But she always wanted to slap him. So after she was married and had a child of her own, he was about 8, 10 years old, one day she told him to do something, and he came up to her and stuck up his face like that, and he said he didn't want to, and said she just slapped him down. She just knocked him flat on the floor. Whew. Then she was amazed at herself. Why had she done a thing like that? She went in her bedroom and sat down, and she knew she had not slapped her son. She had slapped her brother, whom she wanted to slap for 40 years and hadn't been able to. She'd taken it out on this child. That's the heart of the whole matter. There's something in us that boils up when we see something that reminds us of a situation we couldn't handle way back yonder. That's when we go into flame. It's because these things are in ourselves that we have so much trouble with the things from without. And when I read of Jesus and his ability during that terrible night of trial to be dragged from one place to another and to be spat upon and derided and slapped, and yet to stand there with never flush of the face evidently, with no retaliation, calmly poised like a god. I say, how was he able to do it? Was he able to do it because there was nothing inside of Jesus that responded to the wickedness on the outside? I believe so. I think that's the secret of his ability to endure that night. There was nothing in Jesus that rose up in flaming retaliation against the hate that was poured upon him. His clothes were taken off and he was beaten. And a crown of thorns was placed on his head and jammed down until the blood ran down his face. He wore the thorns for us. Thorns. 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 Christ Jesus carried the thorns in his flesh in order that we might be released from the thorns that fester in our deep selves. He carried the thorns. There was a purpose in the thorns. And because he carried the thorns, we can turn to him the thorns that hurt us. When I have been out and have ministered to a number of people, sometimes I take on the symptoms of the people for whom I pray. And there was a long time before I knew how to get rid of those thorns I had taken on. And then I discovered how. And before I went home, I would go to my church and kneel at the chancel and look up at the picture of Jesus standing with his arms outstretched. Come unto me, all ye that are weary and are heavy laden. And I would take all of these thorns that I had taken over from other people, and I would just lift them up and say, Jesus, take them. You ask for them. They're yours. You are our burden bearer. And then it came to me that when I picked the thorn out of my daughter's hand, I was happy that I held it in my hand. It couldn't hurt her. Give the Lord Christ the thorns in my own life? Yes, he wants them. He wants to hold them in his hands because when he has them, they're not in us anymore. So we come before him, and I found that when I knelt at the chancel of my church and looked up above the altar and at this picture of Jesus and lifted up my hands and put the thorns in my hands and said, take them, Christ, he took them. He wants the thorns that prick us. He wants the thorns in our lives that fester. And he it is who can take these thorns and make us every whit whole. As we go to our prayer groups this afternoon, and you take on your written papers the buried hurts of your life from 10 to 20, write down also the thorns that are in the deep subconscious. Sometime today, go to a prayer room and kneel there and put the thorns from your deep life into your hands and lift them up to Christ, whose picture you will see. And give them unto him just as I took the thorn from the hand of my child. And it will be a precious offering unto God. O thou blessed Christ, we need not bear any burden alone. For you have said, come unto me. You understand these thorns that are deeply buried in our flesh, that poison us. You're interested that the house of life in which we live should be cleansed. Enter in, O thou gentle Spirit, with thy great pervading love, and help us to loosen all of these thorns and to give them unto thee who did wear the thorns upon thy brow.